I'm a weaver, then an artist, and I run a product design studio in New York City. I get asked to talk a lot about creativity and inspiration, and I could talk for hours. But geez, when you ask me to talk about myself, I want to hide under a rock. Today I'm going to try to talk about both, but primarily about weaving and transformation. For those of you that aren't familiar with contemporary Lapp looms, this is one of many that I have in my studio. I often trial discarded objects from everyday life on these looms. These are my great-grandmother and my grandmother's pearls that I found cleaning out my parents' house. Now, this is where I weave large woven sculptures. I love weaving. I love the solitude. To tell you the truth, confession, people really scare me. But when I'm on my loom, I feel calm and steady. I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing and where I'm supposed to be. The ritual of using my hands and the repetitive process of weaving, it really slows me down and it calms my mind. I grew up in Bloomington, Illinois. My dad was a third-generation scrap metal dealer. So when my girlfriends went to the mall, I got to go with him to the junkyard. It was a blast. I got to use the scales, and I got to separate metals, and I got to explore the treasures that people would throw out. It's amazing. It's the first time I realized that you could reuse and transform something into something else. My dad loved all the local artists in town. He gave them free rein to take whatever they wanted from the junk piles. He even had a warehouse for them to work in. So you can imagine, our house was filled with art. You know those hubcap sculptures? I thought everybody had them. This was in our backyard, much to my mom's dismay. She hated it. So I'll tell you a little bit about my mom. She was not the warm and fuzzy type. She really wanted to be the artist in the family. Her mother was a portrait painter, but instead my mom drank. Yeah, so any of you out there that have been raised by an alcoholic parent with mental health issues, you know what I'm talking about. Especially, it's really hard on a sensitive child. So I submerged myself in every art class I could find and eventually made my way to the University of Iowa, where I fell in love with weaving. And I realized after 4 years, I could transform that love of weaving into a career in New York City. So for the next 15 years, I cultivated a style in the commercial textile industry and started my business in 1995. In 2009, I got a call from my dad's doctors saying that his heart was failing. Painful. So I invited him to join my husband and son and I just for a visit so he could see my doctors. I just wanted to make sure, right? And what that meant is that he had to move into my work-live studio. At the time, we were trying to figure out what we were going to do for a holiday greeting card. Every year I like to weave a gift for friends and clients. So since my dad was there, I thought, it has to have something to do with him. So I looked around the house, and this is what I found in my closet. We'd save them and save them and save them, and eventually take them back to the dry cleaners, right? These are used dry cleaning hangers. So the card read, reuse, rekindle, rejoice. Sent it out. About a week and a half later, a friend who was the design director at a firm in Seattle, Washington, called and said, wow, I really love this. Can you make it like 13 feet wide and 8 feet tall? And I was like, quickly did the calculation. You know, I'm always the pleaser. Whatever, sure, I'll do it. 3,500 hangers. That's what it would use. So it would take us 6 months to go to every dry cleaner in the East Village, right? So I called her back and I said, what do you think if we made this into a collaboration? And your firm starts collecting hangers, and ask the contractor that's building the building to collect hangers, and even the client. I actually didn't know who the client was at that time. And she loved the idea, and the project was approved. This is my son, Gabe. He's out there somewhere. He got the fun job of untangling and cutting. The summer of his senior, he cut every one of those wires the summer of his senior year in high school. And it gave us a great bonding experience. Well, he's here, you could ask him. I think he may have a totally different story about that summer. This is the final piece. It's housed at the Gates Foundation, and it sits in between Bill and Melinda's offices. All of that, like just saying, right? All of that from a small greeting card that I sent out into the universe. So it turns out that the Gates piece was really about my dad, and as I wove, it was about his relationship with my mother. It was about strengths and weaknesses and their jagged relationship and actually their unhappy marriage. In November of 2011, my dad died. And so that was 3 months after I asked my husband to move out. So this was a really tough time for me. It was the divorce took 4 years, and it was, he was my partner at work and also my life partner. So it got really, really messy. And it was really hard at that time, when you're going through something painful like that, to not listen to that voice inside of your head that chronically says that there's something really wrong with you. So after the dust had settled, I was looking around going, what the heck just happened? And what am I going to do with all of these? These are my divorce documents. So this was the answer. It's a series that I call Pulp Fiction. And thanks. Now this piece was called His and Hers. It's really hard to find humor in divorce papers, but it can be found, and this is what I did. We were working with texture and dualities in my office, you know, and those kind of things that you have in relationships, like who's the messy one and who's the neat one, and orderly and chaotic and all of that. So I would take the files and I separated into what he got, his, and what I got, hers. And I would read them. And it would take hours. And then I would shred them. And it was so satisfying. Oh, it was like purging. And then I would take all these shredded papers. I had to keep them separated, God forbid. And I would strand them 4 strands together for the neat side and single strands for the tidy, or the messy side. And as I wove each section, my marriage became clearer to me. I could see what worked and what didn't and why. And the process of weaving on the loom allowed me to relax and forgive myself and forgive others. The other thing that I do to relax is I take long walks on the beach. I started noticing there are Mylar balloons everywhere. My sanctuary is Fire Island. That's the beach I go to. I'm a weekend warrior out there. And I started seeing them. They're everywhere. They're in the dunes. They're in the snow fences. I'm kind of known as the Mylar balloon lady. You can imagine. It's a really good title at the beach. So I started collecting them, just hoping that a project would unfold. There's birthdays, and there's anniversaries, and there's Father's Day, and there's Mother's Day. there's everything, all of these balloons. So I would bring them back and I'd wash them off because a lot of them were filthy. And then I'd dry them. And then I would like color grade them. My son would come into the house and go, "What are you doing?" "I'm color grading the balloons." And he'd be like, "You got to get a life, Mom," right? So anyway, about 18 months ago, I got a call from the art committee from a temple in Dallas. And they asked me if I would consider weaving a commission for a new chapel they were building. And could I send my work? They had heard of me, they hadn't really seen my work, and so I sent them images, and it took a little while, and I was like, oh, maybe they're not. And they called and they said, well, we're not quite sure we understand the materials that you're using. So I thought, yeah, I guess shredded divorce documents might not go down so well with your congregation. Is that what it's about? I could weave with anything, And so they wanted something a little bit more traditional. They wanted wools and silks and linens, and I tried really hard, and I just couldn't make anything sing. So I wove this, and I put little strips of balloons in it and sent this. And they called back and they said, "This is beautiful, but we need it to be chunkier." And I'm like, yeah. And they said, "What's the fiber that's shiny?" And I thought, oh no. And I said, "These are Mylar balloons that I've been collecting on the beach, and just think, the chapel could have, this ark cover could have every family celebration and milestone all woven in it. It makes so much sense to me, right? It's like, plus the social commentary of how we're polluting the earth. It could all be there, and they got it, and they connected with it. So this was installed. Thanks. Thank you. This was installed 3 weeks ago, just in time. Pictures just came in last week, and it's called A Light Spanned. So I'm so thrilled that the temple decided to the material change, because I believe that people go to worship and pray sometimes because they feel like trash and disposed, and what we really want to feel is picked up and repurposed and transformed into something beautiful and connected with something. When I became successful as an artist, my mom, oh my God, it was really hard on her. She wanted to be the artist in the family, like my grandmother. And I feel badly that my mother couldn't connect with that juice. Because I realized for me that the solution was weaving, that creativity can heal open wounds, and it can even mend a broken heart. That the creative process can connect you with yourself and your community and even your higher purpose. But most of all, creativity has the power to transform. Thank you.